No one on that shore expected the sea to return anything that morning. The fisherman thought his net had caught debris until a black coffin broke the surface of the water, heavy, sealed, floating where no coffin should ever be. His hands trembled as he pulled it closer, his heart pounding with a fear he couldn't explain. People warned him to leave it, to push it back into the ocean, to forget what he saw, but something inside him refused. When he opened the coffin, he didn't scream. He collapsed to his knees and cried, because inside wasn't death, it was a secret meant to disappear forever. And what he did next would change 2 lives and haunt the truth behind that coffin forever.
The morning the sea gave up its secret. The sky was the color of old bruises, heavy with clouds that seemed to press down on the water like a warning. The fisherman had been awake since before dawn, his hands cracked with salt and age, his back bent from decades of pulling nets from the same restless waters. He had survived storms, hunger, and loss, but nothing prepared him for the moment his net snagged on something that did not move, did not fight, and did not belong to the living world beneath the waves. When the object finally broke the surface, dripping black water and seaweed, his breath caught in his throat. It was a coffin, a real one, heavy, sealed, floating where no coffin should ever be. For a long moment he stood frozen in his small wooden boat, listening to the low groan of the ocean and the creak of the boards beneath his feet. The coffin knocked gently against the side of the boat, as if asking to be acknowledged. Fear crawled up his spine, but curiosity, mixed with a strange sense of responsibility, was stronger. He had lived his entire life believing the sea returned only what it wanted remembered. With trembling hands, he tied the coffin to his boat and began the slow, silent journey back to shore, his heart pounding harder with every pull of the oar. Before the story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of humanity even in the darkest moments, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The fisherman was a man shaped by quiet tragedies. Years earlier, the sea had taken his wife during a sudden storm, leaving him to raise their young daughter alone. He had done his best, teaching her to read by lantern light and to laugh even when food was scarce. But fate had been cruel again. Illness came swiftly, stealing his daughter before she reached adulthood. Since then, the fisherman had lived alone in a small shack near the shore, speaking more to the waves than to people. Fishing was not just his work, it was the only way he knew how to keep breathing. As he dragged the coffin onto the wet sand, villagers began to gather at a distance, whispering, crossing themselves, afraid of bad omens. Some urged him to leave it alone, to push it back into the sea and forget it ever appeared. But the fisherman felt something deep inside him, a pull stronger than fear. This coffin had come to him for a reason. He cleared the seaweed away, revealing old carvings on the wood, softened by water, but still visible. There was no name, no date, only deep scratches that looked less like decoration and more like desperate marks. The effort of opening it felt unbearable. His hands shook, his breath came in short bursts, and his mind filled with memories of graves he had stood beside, of prayers whispered into cold earth. When the lid finally loosened, a sharp ache spread through his chest, as if his heart already knew what his eyes were about to see. He paused, tears stinging, then forced himself to lift it. Inside the coffin lay a small, soaked bundle, wrapped in cloth, fragile and heartbreakingly still. The fisherman fell to his knees. The weight of grief he thought he had already carried his entire life crashed over him again, fresh and raw. He cried not only for what was inside the coffin, but for every loss the sea had ever claimed, including his own family. His tears fell onto the wood, mixing with seawater, as his hands hovered, unsure whether he could bear to touch what fate had placed before him. As he slowly unwrapped the cloth, he realized the bundle was not what he expected. Beneath the layers was a child, small and pale, with closed eyes and lips slightly parted, as if caught between worlds. But there was something else, a faint warmth, a barely noticeable rise and fall of the chest. The fisherman gasped, disbelief cutting through his sorrow like lightning through darkness. The child was alive.
Panic and purpose collided within him. The fisherman wrapped the child tightly in his own worn jacket and began running toward the village, his legs burning, his lungs screaming for air. The same people who had feared the coffin now stared in shock as he passed them, shouting for help with a voice rough from years of silence. Someone brought blankets. Someone else ran to fetch the local doctor. Time stretched painfully as the fisherman refused to let go, his hands trembling as he felt the fragile heartbeat beneath his palms. The child was a little girl, no older than 6. Her skin was marked with bruises that told a story of cruelty far worse than the sea itself. As warmth returned to her body, shallow breaths grew steadier. The fisherman watched her as if she were made of glass, afraid that a single wrong move might shatter her. In her face he saw echoes of his lost daughter, the same curve of the cheek, the same quiet vulnerability. Something inside him shifted, a place he thought had died long ago. News spread quickly. Authorities arrived, asking questions, examining the coffin, trying to understand who would seal a living child inside and cast her into the ocean. It was later discovered that she had been the unwanted burden of a powerful man trying to erase a shameful secret. The coffin was meant to be a final solution, a silent ending hidden beneath waves. But the sea had refused to be complicit. It had delivered the child to the one man who knew loss deeply enough to protect her. Recovery was slow. The girl spent days hovering between sleep and waking, her small body fighting exhaustion and trauma. The fisherman rarely left her side. He slept in a chair beside her bed, holding her hand, whispering prayers he had not spoken since his wife's funeral. When she finally opened her eyes fully and looked at him, something ancient and sacred passed between them. She did not speak, but her fingers tightened around his, trusting him without question. As weeks passed, the fisherman's life changed in ways he never imagined. The empty shack by the shore filled with quiet movement and soft breaths. He learned how to care for a child again, how to cook warm meals instead of surviving on dry bread, how to smile without guilt. The villagers, once distant, began to help, bringing clothes, toys, and food. The coffin, now empty, was buried far from the water, not as a symbol of death, but as a reminder that even the darkest intentions can be undone. The man who tried to destroy the child was eventually exposed, his wealth unable to protect him from the truth. But the fisherman paid little attention to the world's judgment. His focus was on the girl, who slowly learned to laugh again, her eyes brightening each day. She began to follow him to the shore, sitting nearby as he worked, watching the waves with curiosity instead of fear. The sea, once his greatest enemy, had given him a reason to live again. Years went by. The girl grew stronger, her scars fading but never forgotten. She learned the value of kindness not from words, but from the man who had saved her without hesitation. The fisherman, once bent and broken by grief, stood a little taller. He spoke more. He laughed more. His heart, once closed by loss, now beat with a quiet, steady hope. On the anniversary of the day the coffin appeared, the fisherman and the girl returned to the shore together. The sky was clear, the water calm, as if the ocean itself remembered.
They stood side by side, holding hands, both understanding without needing to say a word that their lives had been forever altered by that moment. The fisherman felt tears again, but this time they were not only for sorrow. They were for gratitude, for the strange mercy that had found him when he least expected it. The girl grew into a woman who carried compassion in everything she did. She chose a life of helping others, especially children who had been abandoned or hurt. She often spoke of the sea, not as something to fear, but as a force that returns truth to the surface. The fisherman lived long enough to see her become everything the world had once tried to deny her. When he finally passed, peacefully, she buried him overlooking the water he had loved and survived. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something deep and human, please take a moment now to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who may be struggling in silence. And before this story ends, I ask you to leave a comment below. Tell us what this story made you feel, or share a moment when kindness changed your life. Because sometimes the world tries to bury what it fears, and sometimes kindness pulls it back into the light.